Good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure to talk to you this afternoon about data sharing initiatives in the field of epilepsy, particularly across Europe. So if we think of epilepsy, a condition where individuals are prone to recurrent epileptic seizures, and defined now as a disease of the brain, where there have been at least 2 unprovoked seizures occurring more than 24 hours apart, or where there's 1 unprovoked seizure and a probability of further seizures similar to that, the general reoccurrence risk of at least 60% after 2 unprovoked seizures occurring over the next 10 years. And overall, thinking of an epileptic seizure as a symptom, then we are aware that it is a symptom of many underlying causes, and therefore the epilepsies should be considered a group of diseases. The genetic revolution over the past 10 to 15 years has seen an explosion in the determination of an underlying cause of particularly genetic variants as monogenic causes of many of the epilepsies. And indeed, that has led us to a better understanding, perhaps, in looking at the underlying pathophysiology with regard to the underlying cause of the epilepsies, not least looking for what the different genetic variants code for. And with that increasing recognition, and the increasing recognition that this is a group of rare diseases, there has been the recognition that we really need to look at this collaboratively, not least to look at the different ranges of clinical presentation, but also with regard to ongoing management options. However, it's not only the underlying rarity of the different diseases, but also the ongoing complexity. And even if we look at pre-surgical evaluation and those coming for surgical evaluation and ultimately surgery as a management option, then these require complex investigation and also decision-making processes, whether it be a preliminary evaluation, more complex investigation, ultimate discussion, and decisions about surgery, or indeed the staging of surgery with invasive EEG monitoring, a highly specialised investigation that requires a specialised multidisciplinary team. So recognising the need to work collaboratively to increase access, perhaps, of such management options to individuals across Europe, the Epilepsy Network was a pilot European reference network that was set up in 2013. And this involved 15 centres within the network, with a further 11 associate centres. And the prime drive of this network was indeed to increase the availability of discussion, utilising virtual networks of individual cases, and also to provide online availability of certain tools that could enhance pre-surgical evaluation. Certain deliverables were indeed achieved, not least online discussion of cases, also starting the process with regard to systematic reviews and recommendations. But an e-database was also set up to record patients from across Europe to look at their ongoing evaluation and the results of evaluation and ultimate procedures that have been undertaken, so that that data could be collected collaboratively and outcomes reviewed. This network was funded for 3 years, and with the call for European reference networks put out in 2016, it was recognised that not only the surgical cohort could benefit from such a network, but also the wider group, as illustrated, of rarer epilepsies. And the European reference network EpiCare was indeed approved. This initially of 28 centres across Europe, although now a further 30 associate centres now coming on board with regard to participation in the network, with various collaborations, not least from patient advocacy groups, but also other European initiatives in order to enhance progress with regard to care of individuals with rare and complex epilepsies. But one of the key questions has always been, where are the individual patients? Each individual type of epilepsy or cause of epilepsy will be rare and only an occurrence of 1 or 2 patients perhaps in each healthcare provider. And therefore, in collecting information about those epilepsies, how do we know the response to treatments and when they're happening that infrequently? Can we evaluate response to treatments? And can we evaluate overall outcomes? So in order to, one of the main aims of the European reference networks overall was to initiate registries so that it could be the different rare diseases could indeed be located, and we'd know where the patients were in the event of progressing to audits and indeed clinical trials. The main objectives in initiating the Epicare registry in the short term was to set up a central REDCap registry that could be utilised by all Epicare centres, and also to further develop and ensure operability. In the medium term, to make it interoperable so that there could be linkages with Orphanet and WHO codes, as well as genetic databases. And in the long term, having a direct portal for patient-reported outcomes, so that there could include links within Epicare, but also connections with other patient organisations and healthcare providers. There was a structure with regard to the oversight and indeed the development, and cross-working between Great Ormond Street Hospital in London that initiated and developed the process, and Biomaris that could come on board with regards to the verification and indeed the data administration. This has been a several stage process, and in the first instance, an Excel database, a registry, has been formulated in order that we can start to record patients. And the idea is that ultimately, with the development of pseudo-anonymization, which has taken rather a long process in Europe at the present time, once that comes on board, we'll be able to upload the Excel data registers into the centralized REDCap database, so that individuals will be able to upload data from different healthcare providers. So in the immediate term, we are still piloting the registry that we have, both in Excel and REDCap format. We're launching training and with animation in order that we can make sure that healthcare providers are all on board. And ultimately, we'll launch the REDCap registry with central data entry and indeed pseudo-anonymization, with ethical approval at all sites and implementation of all tools at all sites. But it's not only a case of registering the patients, we also need to have some tool to know where those patients are. And some members of Epicare, not least the heads within genetic research based in Florence, David Amai and Renzo Guarini, have been working with Professor Tony Brooks from Leicester University as part of EJP-RD with the development of the RD Nexus Cafe Variophone platform, to work together to bring that together to make a genetic platform where more of a discovery platform that individuals will be able to find out where other like individual patients are within the network. The genetic discovery platform has been developed under the aegis of the ERN Epicare, with interoperability guaranteed through several standards. And the idea is that genetic data can be discovered, but not necessarily shared in compliance with GDPR. There's a customizable menu to explore both phenotypic and genetic data related to patients with epilepsy. And therefore, it can be very flexible, as data can be made available for the discovery process in many different ways. And with the work that's been done, it's now ready for beta testing within Epicare. So the whole idea, as I said, is not to share data, but to allow queries to discover where data may be, discover where, like patients, whether it's through clinical phenotype or genotype may be, whether there are groups of patients with similar presentation, similar genetic variants. The genetic platform is not a database, but is a search optimized index of data, allowing discovery of the existence of relevant records. And the results can be returned to users in different ways. So this just gives a general overview of quite a complex process, but overall just emphasizing the fact there are different ways that data can be searched and verified, and then an output generated, as I said, as a discovery process, not of a transfer of data. But of course, we can also work beyond the network and work with others. This just giving an example, a project Solve RD, which is actually a way of looking at unsolved cases of rare diseases with regard to genetics, and offering an ability to actually look again and solve the underlying question. And this is working again in collaboration with Epicare, so that we can look at unsolved patients with developmental and epileptic encephalopathies, as well as rare familial epilepsy syndromes. And we can also collect data with regard to the possible consequences of epilepsy, not necessarily the cause or the management, but also the ongoing consequences. And an example of this is sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, where there are existing cohorts of patients being followed, utilising registries to identify SUDEP risk factors. And there's the initiative in Europe, led in France, and also the NIH Centre Without Walls for SUDEP, based in the US. So just to highlight, there is an ongoing need for data sharing within both the rare and complex epilepsies, and a need to collect data across healthcare providers to report on prevalence, to gain information on optimal treatments, and also with regard to possibly in the longer term tracking over time. And certainly with the ability with the discovery database to interrogate where data is held on individual diagnoses rather than extracting the data directly, so we know where to go and we know where patients may be with similar phenotypes or indeed genotypes. And ultimately, we don't limit that to its only. Epilepsy may not only be a manifestation on its own, it may be a manifestation in association with many other diseases, and therefore cross-working with other European reference networks is a way forward to enhance the progress for children and adults with rare and complex epilepsies. Thank you.